The first coin landed on the toe of my boot, and I knew at once it had been thrown to be heard, not given to be kept. It rang on the polished leather, spun once on the cobbles of the Aldergate forecourt, and lay there in the gas lamp light like a small, bright accusation. A voice followed it, big and easy, the voice of a man who had never once stood in a line he did not own. "Pick it up, sentry," the voice said. "There's another 9 where that came from. Pick it up, give me a face, and you'll be the richest soldier on this square by morning." I did not pick it up. I did not look down at it. I looked as I had been trained for 11 years to look, at a fixed point above the heads of the crowd, a notch in the stone of the gatehouse arch where 2 courses of masonry met unevenly, a flaw I had used as my anchor on 1,000 nights, and I kept my breathing slow, and I let the coin lie. This was the gas lamp years, when the great houses were lit by hissing flame, and the city's news came off iron presses that ran all night, and a man named RoyalGuard owned more of those presses than any house in the realm. I knew him by reputation before I knew his face. Everyone did. The costly papers were on every breakfast table from the river to the hills, and RoyalGuard had built them by understanding a single thing better than any rival, that a picture printed on the front page could lift a man up or pull him down, and that most men, faced with a lens, would do almost anything to be lifted. He had come to the Aldergate that night with a plate camera and a man to carry it, and he had come to pull me down. I should tell you who I was, so you understand why he chose me and why he chose wrong. My name is Halik Voss. I had served the house of Marin, an old, proud, wholly ordinary royal house, the kind history forgets between the famous reigns, for 11 years, the last 6 of them on the night watch at the Aldergate, the western gate of the residence, where the forecourt opened onto a public square, and the city could come right up to the railings and look. I had stood there in summer when the heat off the cobbles bent the air, and in the deep of winter when frost grew on the brass of my buttons, and I had not once given the square a face. Not a smile, not a scowl, not a flinch. The stillness was not pride. It was the post. The post was the thing. A sentry who gives a face has stopped being a gate and started being a man, and the moment you are a man again you can be moved. RoyalGuard did not believe that. He believed everyone could be moved. He had built an empire on it. "You heard me," he said, and stepped closer, into the pool of light beneath the gas lamp on its iron standard, so that I could see him properly for the first time. He was perhaps 60, well-fed, beautifully dressed, with side whiskers gone silver and a watch chain across his front thick enough to moor a boat. He had the face of a man who has spent 40 years watching other men decide it was easier to please him than to refuse him. "I'm Costley," he said, as if the name were a key that turned every lock. "You'll have seen my papers. The whole city sees my papers. And tomorrow morning, the whole city is going to see you." Behind him, his cameraman had set the tripod down on the cobbles and was sliding a plate into the back of the great boxy camera, his head ducking under the black cloth and out again. A few late walkers had stopped at the railing to watch. It was past 11. The square was thinning, but it was not empty, and Costley had picked his hour well. Enough audience to make a scene, not so much that anyone of consequence would be passing. "Here's how it goes," Costley said, conversational now, almost kind, the way a man is kind when he has already decided how a thing will end. "I've a page held open for the morning edition, a big one, front above the fold. And the picture that's going on it is one of you, sentry, the famous stone soldiers of the Aldergate, the men who never move, the men who'd let the city burn before they'd blink." He spread his hands. "Only in my picture you're going to be doing something a little undignified, crossing your eyes perhaps, or saluting a lamppost, or holding your nose, something the breakfast tables will laugh at. Something that makes the whole grand performance look like exactly what it is, a costume and a man pretending to be a wall." He smiled. "And the caption underneath will say what everyone already suspects, that you're not really so disciplined. That a few coins and a famous name will buy a clown out of any one of you. if a man only knows how to ask. I will tell you because this is my account and I have promised myself I would tell it straight, that the word clown went into me like a splinter. 11 years, 6 on this gate. My father had stood a gate before me, and his shoulder had never been right after a winter he would not leave his post, and he had taught me without ever once saying it aloud that the stillness was the whole of the thing, that anyone could carry a rifle, but only a certain kind of man could carry stillness for 8 hours in the cold with the city laughing at the railing, and mean it. So the splinter went in, and I let it, and I did not move. Nothing, Cosley said, and tilted his head, studying me the way he must have studied 1,000 front pages deciding what would sell. They trained that into you well, I'll grant them, but I've never met the wall I couldn't get a window into. He turned his head a fraction toward the railing, toward the watchers, raising his voice so they would have it too. Watch this. He thinks he's stone. By the time I'm done he'll have given me a face whether he wants to or not, and you'll all read about it over your eggs. He bent with a small grunt and picked up his own coin off the cobbles, and he held it up between 2 fingers in the gaslight so the cameraman could see it, so the railing could see it. We'll start gentle, he said. We'll start with what works on everyone. He came right up to the line. A sentry's space is supposed to keep clear, close enough that I could smell the cigar on him and the pomade in his whiskers, and he pressed the coin flat against the front of my tunic, over the brass, and he held it there. That's a month's wages, soldier, he said softly, just for me now. One face, one foolish face for the morning. Nobody will ever know it cost you nothing but your dignity, and dignity doesn't buy bread. His voice dropped lower still, warm and reasonable and utterly certain. Everybody has a price. Every wall has a window. Let's find yours. I looked at the notch in the stone above his head, the uneven course where the 2 lines of masonry failed to meet, and I thought, as clearly as I have ever thought anything, this man has never once been told no by someone who could not be made to pay for it. He was about to be. The coin against my chest grew warm from his fingers, and when nothing happened, no flinch, no glance down, no quickening of breath he could photograph, Cosley took it away and stepped back, and the warm patience went out of his face by a degree. Not gone, just thinner. A man like that does not lose his temper all at once. He loses it the way frost spreads, fine and slow, from the edges in. All right, he said. All right, pride, I respect pride. Pride's a thing I can use. He snapped his fingers without looking, and the cameraman came around from behind the great box, a younger man with ink-stained cuffs and a nervous way of holding himself. The way a man holds himself when he has watched his employer do this sort of thing before and has learned not to have opinions about it. Vanner, Cosley said. The bell. The cameraman Vanner produced from his coat a small brass handbell, the kind a schoolmaster might ring, and at a nod he stepped to the side of me, just at the edge of where I could see him without turning, and he rang it hard, twice, 3 times, sharp peals that bounced off the gatehouse stone and rolled out across the square. People at the railing turned. Somewhere a dog began to bark. Folk jump at a bell, Cosley told the watchers, pleased, performing for them now. It's older than thinking, you can't help it. Even a stone soldier, ring a bell in his ear and his eyes'll go to it, and that's all I need. One blink. One little human blink in the wrong place. He nodded at Vanner, and the bell came again, right at my ear, so close I felt the small wind of it. I did not look at the bell. I have a trick for the bell, though it is not a trick so much as a discipline. You decide before your watch that there is exactly one thing in the world worth looking at, and you give that one thing the whole of your attention, and everything else becomes weather. The notch in the stone was my one thing. The bell was weather. It rang, and it was loud, and it was nothing, and I let it be nothing. And after a dozen peals Vanner's arm tired, and he glanced at Cosley, and Cosley's mouth was a thin line now. Put it away, he said. A different man would have given up there. But Orend Cosley had not built what he had built by giving up at the first wall, and worse, far worse for him, though I did not yet see how it would turn. There were 40 people at the railing now, drawn by the bell and the famous man and the soldier who would not break, and Orend Costly had announced to all of them that he would have my face by morning. He had bought a wager he could not now afford to lose in front of witnesses. The very crowd he had gathered to laugh at me had become the chain around his own neck. He had to win, and they were watching, and I could see in the set of his jaw the precise moment. The night stopped being sport and became a thing he could not walk away from. "You think this is about you," he said to me, low and hard, all the warmth gone out of it. "It isn't. Nobody cares about you, Sentry. You're a costume. But I told these people I'd get a face out of the famous stone wall, and now I'm going to get it because Orend Costly does not tell a story he can't finish." He jerked his chin at Vanner. "The hat." What followed I will set down plainly, because for the better part of an hour Orend Costly did everything a clever and increasingly desperate man could do to a sentry who is forbidden to leave his post or raise his hand. He took off his own tall hat and set it on the muzzle of my rifle and waited for me to feel the insult of it and react. I let it sit. It was weather. He had Vanner walk a slow circle around me reading aloud in a mocking sing-song, a fictitious account of the brave defenders of the Aldergate who fled at the sight of a moth, inventing it as he went, embroidering it for the railing, watching my eyes for the flicker of anger that would make a photograph. There was no flicker. He told a string of jokes, some of them genuinely funny, the kind a hard week of men in a barrack room could not have heard without laughing, and I will admit 2 of them cost me. But a sentry's face does not laugh from the inside out. It laughs only when you let it reach the surface, and I did not let it reach the surface. He stood directly in front of the lens between me and the camera and made faces of his own broad, clownish faces, hoping I would mirror one by reflex the way a tired man yawns when another man yawns. I did not mirror him. I looked at the notch in the stone, past his shoulder, and the notch did not make faces, and so neither did I. And all the while the plate camera waited on its tripod with its single glass eye open and its slide drawn back, ready to take whatever Costly could pry out of me in a fraction of a second, because that was the whole game, you understand. He did not need an hour of dignity from me. He needed one bad instant, one frame. The camera does not care that a man held himself like iron for 59 minutes. It prints only the 60th, and Orend Costly had built an empire on the difference. Give him a single sneeze, a single watering eye, a single startled blink at a bell, and his retoucher would make the rest. And the morning edition would carry the stone soldier, unmasked above the fold, and 100,000 breakfast tables would laugh, and I would be, for the rest of my service, the man who broke. So I did not give him the instant. Not because I am made of better stuff than other men, I am not, but because I understood, standing there with his hat on my rifle and his jokes in my ears, the exact shape of what he wanted, and a thing you can see clearly is a thing you can refuse. He wanted a fraction of a second. I had only to deny him a fraction of a second. 8 hours of stillness is hard. A single second of stillness, repeated, is just 1 second, and then another, and a man can do 1 second forever if he never lets himself count past it. There was a long stretch in the middle of that hour that I have never been able to forget, because it was the worst of it, and because it was, though I did not know it then, the exact point on which the whole night turned. Costly had run through his easy tricks and his clever tricks, and they had all broken on the stone of me, and a smaller man would have been ashamed and gone home. But Costly was not a smaller man, and shame in him came out sideways, as cruelty. He began to talk about my house. Not the truth of it. He knew nothing true about the house of Marin or about me, but a sneering, invented version, the version his papers ran whenever they wanted to make the ordinary great houses look foolish for the breakfast tables. He said the Aldergate Guard were paid in buttons and pride because the house could not afford real soldiers. He said a man only took a post like mine because no honest trade would have him. He said my father, if I had one, must have been the same kind of costumed fool, standing in the cold so his betters could feel grand walking past. I have told you the word clown was a splinter. This was a blade, and he found it, The way a man who has hurt people for a living all his life can find the soft place in anyone if he is patient and cruel enough. My father had stood this gate. My father's shoulder had never come right. And here was a rich man in a warm coat inventing my father into a joke for 60 strangers, fishing with him for the flinch he had not been able to buy. And I will tell you what I did, because it is the truest thing in this account. I thought of my father. I let myself think of him on purpose, fully, the cold mornings and the bad shoulder, and the way he had never once explained the stillness because he believed a thing you explain you have already half surrendered. And I understood that the surest way to make my father a joke was to do exactly what Costly wanted, to let this man reach inside me and pull a face out, and prove that the stillness my father gave his shoulder for could be bought or baited after all. The only way to honor him was to give Costly nothing. So the blade went in, and I held the stone, and I did not flinch, and somewhere in there I stopped being a soldier enduring an insult and became a son keeping faith, and that was easier, because a son will hold longer than a soldier ever can. Costly saw none of it. That is the mercy and the meaning of the stillness. He had reached as deep as he knew how to reach, and the surface had not so much as rippled, and he had no way to know whether he had struck bone or struck nothing at all. He thought he had struck nothing. It enraged him. He did not understand that he had struck everything and that everything had held. The watchers had stopped laughing. That was the first turn, and I felt it before I understood it. They had come to the railing to see a famous man make sport of a soldier, which is a comfortable thing to watch. The powerful being clever at the expense of the humble is the oldest entertainment there is. But somewhere in that hour the comfort had curdled. Because Costly was trying so hard and I was doing so little, and the longer it went the more it was the rich man who looked the fool, sweating in his fine coat, inventing crueler and crueler stunts, his voice climbing, while the soldier simply stood and breathed and looked at the stone. The crowd had come to watch a wall be unmasked. They were watching, instead, a man unmask himself. They just hadn't said it out loud yet. Orand Costly felt it too. I could see him feel it. And it frightened him. And a frightened man with power is the most dangerous kind, because he reaches for the biggest thing he has. Enough games, he said. He came close again, and this time there was no warmth and no performance, only the cold of a man who has decided to spend his whole strength on one push. You listen to me, soldier, and you listen well. His voice was very quiet now, pitched for me alone, and quieter than the bell had ever been, and it landed harder. I have made governors. I have unmade them. There is not a magistrate or a master in this city who will take a sentry's word over Orand Costly's. So here is the last offer and the only one. You give me one foolish face right now of your own free will, or I print one anyway. He let that sit. I have a man who paints out the eyes and paints in new ones. I have a man who takes the corner of a mouth and turns it up into a grin. By morning you'll be crossing your eyes on the front page whether you ever cross them or not, and your colonel will see it, and your house will see it, and there is not one thing you can do to stop me, so you might as well be paid for it. He smiled, and it was an awful smile because it was sincere. Give me the face. At least then it'll be true, and you'll be 10 coins richer for a thing I'm taking anyway. And that threat, the threat to manufacture the lie if I would not perform it, that was the moment I understood what kind of night this had become, and what was truly at stake on it, and it was no longer my dignity at all. Here is what I understood, all in the space of a breath, with the gas lamp hissing over us and his cigar smell in my face. If a man can be made to perform a lie, that is one kind of defeat, and it belongs only to the man who performs it. But if a man can be made into a lie without his consent, if Orand Costly could take an honest soldier doing his honest duty and with paint and a press, turn him into a clown for the whole city to laugh at, and there was nothing the soldier could do, then it was not my defeat at all. It was everyone's. It was every man who stood any kind of post and trusted that what was true about him would in the end be allowed to stay true. Costly was not threatening to expose me. He had no truth to expose. He was threatening to replace the truth with whatever sold papers, and to do it because he could, and to make me thank him for the coins on the way down. So I made my decision, and it was the easiest decision of my 11 years because it was no decision at all. It was simply the post. I would give him nothing. Not a face freely, and not a face under threat, and not the small bitter satisfaction of seeing me weigh his offer. If he was going to manufacture a lie, he would have to do the whole of it himself, with no scrap of the truth to build it on. The picture he printed would have to be entirely his own invention, start to finish, because the man in front of his lens would give him not one true ingredient. And a lie built entirely of nothing, I had begun to suspect, though I did not yet dare to hope it, is a fragile thing, far more fragile than a lie with a single grain of truth at its heart. What I did not know, what I could not have known, standing there at the railing with my eyes on the notch in the stone, was that the night had quietly stopped being his. The first sign of it I read in the crowd. The 40 had become 60, and the 60 had gone silent, and it was not the silence of people enjoying a show. It was the heavier silence of people who have started, against their own first instincts, to take a side, and the side they had taken was not the famous man's. I could not turn my head to count them, but I could hear them, and a crowd tells you everything in the small sounds it makes. There was no laughter now. There were murmurs, low and hard, the kind of murmur that runs along a railing when ordinary people watch power lean on someone who cannot lean back. A man near the gas standard said, not quietly enough, "Leave the lad alone, he's only doing his job." Another voice agreed. A woman's voice said something sharper that I did not catch, but Cosley plainly did, because his shoulders stiffened. And there was something else at the railing, something I would not understand the full weight of until morning. Among the 60, there were 3 or 4 others with notebooks. The Cosley papers were the biggest in the city, but they were not the only ones, and a famous man making a public spectacle at a palace gate at midnight is itself a story, and the smaller papers were always hungry for a story that the giant could not control. They had drifted over for the same reason the rest had: the famous figure, the bell, the soldier who would not break, and now they were doing what newspapermen do. They were writing down what they saw. And what they saw was not what Orend Cosley had promised them. What they saw was a wealthy press baron sweating in his fine coat, bribing and then threatening a young sentry for the better part of an hour, while the sentry stood at his post in perfect silence and did his duty and would not be moved. That was the picture forming in those notebooks, not the one Cosley meant to print, the opposite of it. He had brought witnesses to my humbling. They had become witnesses to his. But I am ahead of myself, and that is not how the night went. The night went hard before it went right. Cosley, when his last offer met the same stone as all the rest, stopped being a showman and became, for a few minutes, simply a powerful man who had been refused, which is an ugly thing to watch. He swept his hat off my rifle's muzzle and jammed it on his own head. He turned on the crowd and told them, his voice cracking up out of its smooth register, that they were fools, that they'd believe a costume over a man who'd put bread on half their tables, that he'd remember every face at this railing. It was a mistake, and even in my stillness I knew it was a mistake, because a man who threatens a crowd has already lost the crowd. Then he rounded back on me. "Nothing," he said. "You hear me. A nobody in a costume. I'll bury you on page 1, and there's not a soul who will lift a finger because nobody knows your name and nobody ever will." He was close again, close as he'd been with the coin, and his certainty was so total and so old that it must have seemed to him like the simple weather of the world, the way the powerful always assume the rules are written in their favor because the rules always have been. Last chance, soldier, the face, or the front page. I held my eyes on the stone. I did not give him the face. And it was then, with his last threat hanging in the gaslight and the camera waiting open behind him and the crowd holding its breath, that a 5th person stepped out of the dark beneath the gatehouse arch, where the lamp did not reach, and into the light. He had been there, I would learn, for a long while. He had come out for his own reasons, on his own quiet rounds, the way he did most nights without anyone marking it. And what he carried changed everything, though it was the smallest thing in the world. A single sheet of folded paper, and the calm of a man who has spent his whole life around words and is not afraid of them. He was an old man, spare and upright, in a plain dark coat with ink at the cuffs not so different from Vanner's, and at first I took him for one of the rival pressmen come closer to the action. He was not. He was Edric Thane, and he was the keeper of the Aldergate, the man whose office it was to log every soul who came and went through the western gate by night, to keep the gate book, to know the square, and to know the city the way a man knows it who has read every paper printed in it for 50 years over a small lamp in a small room while the rest of us slept. He stood a sentry's post once himself, long ago, on this same gate, before the cold took his knees and they gave him the book instead. He had been standing in the dark of the arch behind me for the whole of the hour. He had heard all of it. "Mr. Costley," he said, and his voice was not loud, but it was the kind of voice that has been used to being listened to in quiet rooms, and the square went still to hear it. "I wonder if I might save you a great deal of money." Costley turned, and the contempt was instant. "And who in the devil are you?" "Nobody," Thane said mildly. "A keeper of a gate, a reader of papers, yours among them every morning for 30 years. I dare say I've read more of your words than you have." He came forward into the lamplight, unhurried, and he unfolded the single sheet in his hands. "I keep the gate book, Mr. Costley. Every soul in and out of the Aldergate by night, the hour, the business. It's a small, dull duty, and I've kept it 40 years. And tonight, while you worked, I did what I always do. I wrote down what I saw." He glanced at the sheet. 11 minutes past 11. A Mr. Orrin Costley of the Costley papers arrived at the western railing with one cameraman and one plate camera and threw a coin at the sentry's boot. 20 past. Offered the sentry money to perform a foolish face for a photograph. 1/2 past. Brought a bell to startle him. 1/4 to 12. Set his hat upon the man's rifle, walked a circle reading aloud a story he was inventing as he went. Midnight. Threatened, in front of 60 witnesses, to paint a false face onto the sentry and print it whether the man consented or not. He looked up, and his old eyes were perfectly steady. "I've a clean hand and a steady habit, Mr. Costley. It's all here with the hours. And there are, I should think," he glanced along the railing, "3 other gentlemen here tonight with notebooks of their own, who will have most of it down as well." For the first time all night, Orrin Costley said nothing at all. "You came here to print a story," Thane went on, gently, almost kindly, the way a surgeon is kind. "And you'll get one. But it won't be the story you brought. You see, you were so certain the soldier would be the story that you never once stopped to think that you might be. A famous man bribing and bullying a boy at a palace gate for an hour and the boy never moving, Mr. Costley. That is the front page. That is the better front page. You've spent your whole life knowing exactly which way a story will fall, and tonight, I'm afraid, you've been standing on the wrong side of your own instinct. I have thought in the years since about the precise moment a powerful man understands that the ground has moved under him, and I will tell you it does not look like fear. It looks like arithmetic. I watched it cross Orrin Costley's face in the gaslight. I could watch, because no one was looking at me anymore. The whole square had turned to the old keeper, and what I saw was a man swiftly, helplessly counting. 60 witnesses, 3 rival notebooks, a keeper's log with the hours on it. His own threat, spoken aloud to manufacture a lie. He had built his empire on knowing how a thing would read in the morning, and now he was reading the morning, and the morning was about him. "You wouldn't dare," he said, but it came out thin. "My papers." "Your papers, yes," Thane said. "There's the thing." And here the old man did something I will never forget, because it was the quietest cruelty and the cleanest justice I have ever seen done to a man, and he did it without raising his voice. "Your papers print what sells, Mr. Costley. You've told us so yourself many times in your own columns. You're proud of it. The Costley press prints what the city wants to read over its eggs, you wrote, and never mind the comfortable few who'd rather it didn't." He folded his sheet of paper. Well, tomorrow the city is going to want to read about tonight. Every other paper in town will carry it, the famous Baron and the soldier who wouldn't break, and it will sell more copies than anything they've run in a year. And your editors, your good, loyal, costly editors, the men you've trained to chase a sale above all things and never to spare the comfortable few, your editors will be sitting in your building at 4 in the morning watching the whole city buy a story you are not running. He let that land. What do you suppose they'll do, Mr. Costly? The men you made in your own image. Will they let the Costly press be the one paper in the realm too proud or too frightened to print the story of the year? Or will they do exactly what you taught them and print what sells, even when what sells is you? The silence after that was the deepest of the whole night. Even the gas lamp seemed to hiss more quietly. Orrin Costly stood in the light he had chosen for himself, with his hat crooked and his fine coat dark with the sweat of an hour's failed cruelty, and he understood, I watched him understand, that every weapon he owned had just been turned in his own hand. The press he had built to pull men down, the editors he had bred to chase a sale past any decency, the crowd he had gathered to laugh at me, the very certainty that the rules ran his way. All of it, every piece, was now aimed at him, and there was nothing he could do about any of it, because to fight it he would have to argue that the public should not be told the truth, and the whole of his life had been the loud and profitable opposite of that argument. And then the smallest thing of all undid him. Vanner, the cameraman, the ink-cuffed young man who had rung the bell and carried the box and learned for years to have no opinions, Vanner reached up under the black cloth at the back of the great camera and drew out the glass plate, the one that had waited open all night for my single bad instant and never received it, and he held it up to the gaslight so that everyone could see it was clear, unexposed, blank. An hour of his employer's best work, and not one frame worth taking. "There's no picture, sir," Vanner said quietly. It was, I think, the first thing I had heard him say all night that was his own. There was never going to be a picture. He didn't move. And then to me, not loudly, but I heard it, and so did the railing. "I'm sorry. I've watched him do this for 6 years. I should have put the box down a long time ago." He set the blank plate on the cobbles, gentle as setting down a stone, and he stepped back from the camera, and he was, from that step onward, no longer Costly's man. I never moved through any of it. I want that understood, because it is the whole point, and I have failed to tell this right if it is not plain. I did not win that night by doing anything. I won it by doing nothing, by being, for 1 hour, exactly and only what I had sworn to be, a gate, a wall, a fixed thing in a moving world, and letting every other man in the square decide for himself, in the long, unbroken light of my stillness, what kind of man he wished to be. Costly decided. Vanner decided. The crowd decided. The old keeper had decided long before any of them. I decided nothing except to hold, and the holding was enough, because a lie needs a flinch to feed on, and I gave it none. Orrin Costly left without another word. He simply turned, an old man suddenly, and walked out of the lamplight and across the square and was gone, and his cameraman did not follow him, and the crowd parted to let him through and did not jeer. There was no need. The night had said everything. I held my post until the relief came at 2. I gave my account to the sergeant plainly, and Edric Thane gave his, with the hours on his clean sheet, and that was all that was asked of me. I went to my bunk and I slept, which surprised me. The morning told the rest of it, and it told it exactly as the old keeper had said it would. I have a copy still, folded soft now with handling, of the front page that ran in the largest of the rival papers. The headline plain across the top, no cruelty in it, just the truth. A soldier who would not be moved. Below it, an artist's drawing, because no photograph existed. The gas lamp, the railing, the great empty camera, and a sentry standing as still as the gatehouse stone behind him, while a well-dressed man leaned in and got nothing for his trouble. 3 other papers ran their own versions by noon. The keeper's log was quoted in 2 of them, the hours and all. And the Costly papers. The thing the old man promised came true to the letter, and it was the cleanest justice of all, because no one had to lift a hand to make it happen. Costly's own editors, the men he had spent 30 years training to print what sells and never spare the comfortable, came to work at 4 in the morning and found the whole city buying a story they did not have, and they did exactly what he had made them. They ran it. The Costly press, on its own front page, above the fold, on the very page he had held open to break me, printed the story of the famous baron who could not move a single sentry, and printed it well, because they had been trained to print everything well. He woke to find his own greatest paper had turned the lens around and photographed him in words exactly as he was. The headline he had carried to the Aldergate in his pocket, "Stone Soldier, unmasked, never ran." It never ran anywhere. It died unprinted in his coat. The only headline that came out of that night was the one he never meant to write, and it was about him. He did not fight it. I think he could not. A man who has told the whole world for 30 years that the truth should always be printed cannot, in the 1 week he needs the rule bent, ask the world to bend it. He was not ruined. Men like Costly are not so easily ruined. But he was, for the rest of his days, the man who tried to buy a soldier's dignity, and was made poorer in the only currency that ever mattered in front of the whole city, by standing still. I am told he never again went out at night to make sport of a man who could not answer him. I would like to believe that is true. As for me, I went back on the gate the next night, and the night after, and there is nothing more to tell about that, which is exactly as it should be. A few people came to the railing in those weeks to look at the soldier they'd read about, and they were disappointed, I'm sure, to find him doing nothing whatsoever, looking at a notch in the stone above the arch, breathing slow, being a wall. That is all I ever was. That is all I ever wanted to be. But I learned one thing on that gaslit night that I had not understood in 11 years of standing still, and I have carried it since like a coin I would never throw. They had always told me the stillness was for the gate, that a sentry holds himself so the gate is held. And that is true, but it is not the whole of it. The stillness is also a kind of testimony. A man who will not move, when every reason and every reward and every threat in the world is bent on moving him, is saying a thing without a single word, and saying it to everyone who watches, that some things are true whether or not they are convenient, and that they stay true even when a powerful man with a camera and a press would give a great deal to print otherwise. I had thought, all those years, that I was only holding a gate. I had been holding the truth still long enough for everyone else to see it.